The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal palace of Queen Nara. She stood on her balcony looking down at the courtyard where her servants rushed about their daily tasks. The queen of the Veltharian Empire was known throughout the galaxy for her beauty and her cruelty in equal measure. Her silver hair flowed like liquid metal down her back, and her purple eyes held the coldness of deep space. But today Queen Nara was not thinking about ruling her vast empire. Today her thoughts were focused on the creature locked away in the depths of her palace. The beast that had become both her greatest treasure and her greatest shame. Bigho was unlike any creature in the known universe. The albino tiger stood nearly 4 meters tall when it reared up on its hind legs. Its fur was pure white like fresh snow, but it shimmered with an inner light that seemed to come from another world. The creature's eyes were the most unsettling feature of all. They were like pools of liquid mercury that seemed to look straight into a person's soul. Queen Nara had found Bigho 3 years ago on the jungle moon of Zarion. Her hunting party had been tracking rare crystal birds when they stumbled upon the massive predator sleeping beneath a waterfall. The beast was so beautiful that the queen ordered her soldiers to capture it alive rather than kill it for its pelt. That decision had cost her dearly. The first beast tamer to approach Bigho was Kangsu, the finest animal trainer in the empire. He had tamed fire dragons and ice serpents without breaking a sweat. But when he entered Bigho's cage with his neural whip and control devices, the albino tiger had torn him apart in seconds. The man's screams had echoed through the palace for what seemed like hours. Queen Nara told herself that Kangsu had simply been careless. She brought in Minho, a warrior who had fought in the galactic arena for 20 years. Minho was confident he could break the beast's spirit through combat. He lasted exactly 43 seconds before Bigho's claws found his throat. One by one, the queen brought in the best beast tamers, warriors, and animal psychics in her empire. Each one was certain they would succeed where others had failed. Each one was wrong. Young Sunja had tried to use telepathic control. The albino tiger had somehow reversed her mental attack and left her in a catatonic state for weeks. When she finally woke up, she could only whisper the same words over and over. The White Death sees everything. The White Death feels everything. The veteran tamer Do Hyun had attempted to starve the beast into submission. For 2 weeks, Bigho had refused all food, growing thinner but never weaker. On the 15th day, the tiger had somehow broken through its reinforced cage and nearly killed 3 guards before being subdued with heavy sedatives. By the end of the first year, 17 of the kingdom's finest had tried to tame Bigho. 17. Bodies were buried in the royal cemetery. The beast remained as wild and dangerous as the day it was captured. Queen Nara's advisors begged her to destroy the creature. Her head of security, Captain Dongmin, had pleaded with her for months. "Your Majesty, this beast serves no purpose except to kill our people. We should end this madness before it claims more lives." But the queen refused. Something about Bigho called to her. Perhaps it was the creature's incredible beauty. Perhaps it was her own stubborn pride. She had conquered worlds and commanded fleets of starships. Surely she could find a way to tame one animal. The albino tiger seemed to sense her thoughts during her visits to its chamber. It would pace back and forth behind the energy barriers, watching her with those terrible mercury eyes. Sometimes it would make soft, chuffing noises that almost sounded like laughter, as if it knew exactly how much it tormented her. The palace. Servants whispered that the beast was cursed. They said it could read minds and feel emotions from across the room. They claimed it grew stronger by feeding on fear and anger. Some even believed it was not an animal at all, but a demon in tiger form. Queen Nara dismissed such talk as superstition, but she could not deny that there was something unnatural about Bigho. The creature never seemed to tire. It needed very little food or water, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. Dr. Yun-Su, the royal scientist, had studied the beast extensively from a safe distance. His scans showed that Bigho's brain activity was unlike any known animal. The neural patterns suggested psychic abilities far beyond normal telepathy. The creature could apparently sense the emotional state of any living being within 100 meters. This ability explained why every attempt to tame Bigho had failed so miserably. The beast could feel the fear, anger, and desire to dominate. in anyone who approached. These emotions triggered its killing instinct. The stronger the emotion, the more violent its reaction became. As Queen Nara stood on her balcony this morning, she made a decision that surprised even herself. She would make one final announcement to her court. If no one could tame Bekho within the next lunar cycle, she would have the creature destroyed. The thought filled her with an unexpected sadness. For all the death and destruction it had caused, she had grown oddly attached to the albino tiger. It was magnificent in its wildness, beautiful in its refusal to be broken, but she was a queen first, and her people's safety had to come before her personal feelings. 17 deaths were enough. She would not allow the beast to claim an 18th victim. As she turned to go back inside, Queen Nara did not notice the small streak of light falling from the sky toward the outer rim of her world. The escape pod from a human research vessel was about to crash land on her planet carrying its sole survivor, a quiet boy named Tae Min, who would change everything she thought she knew about the untamable beast called Bekho. The Queen's decision would have to wait. Fate had other plans. The crash site was a mess of twisted metal and smoking debris. Captain Hyunwoo and his patrol squad approached carefully, their energy weapons ready. Their ship had detected the strange vessel entering the atmosphere 3 hours ago. Whatever it had not responded to any communication attempts. "Sir, I am reading one life sign," reported Lieutenant Jin-A as she scanned the wreckage with her handheld device. "It appears to be very weak, but stable." Captain Hyunwoo nodded and gestured for his team to spread out. In his 15 years of military service, he had never seen a ship designed like this one. The hull was made from materials he did not recognize. The symbols painted on the side were completely foreign to him. They found the survivor trapped in what appeared to be an escape pod. The being inside was unlike anything in the Veltharian databases. It was small, much smaller than an adult Veltharian. Its skin was a strange pale color and it had dark hair that fell across its face. Most unusual of all, it appeared to be very young. "Is it some kind of child?" asked Sergeant Bora as they carefully extracted the unconscious form from the wreckage. "I have never seen anything like it," Captain Hyunwoo replied. "We need to get it to the medical bay immediately. The Queen will want to see this creature." The journey back to the capital took 2 hours by transport ship. During the flight, the strange being slowly regained consciousness. It opened its eyes and looked around with obvious confusion and fear. When it tried to speak, the sounds it made were completely foreign to the Veltharian crew. Dr. Sang-min, the ship's medic, ran basic scans on their passenger. The creature appears to be in good health despite the crash. Its biology is similar to ours, but there are significant differences. I believe it is indeed a juvenile of its species. The being seemed to understand that they were trying to help. It pointed to itself and made sounds that might have been its name. After several attempts, the crew determined that it was calling itself something like Tae Min. When they reached the palace, word of the strange visitor had already spread. Queen Nara waited in her throne room surrounded by her advisors and court officials. Captain Hyunwoo escorted Tae Min into the Great Hall, where hundreds of curious eyes stared at the small alien. Tae Min looked around the magnificent room with wide eyes. The walls were covered in precious metals and rare crystals that sparkled in the light. The throne itself was carved from a single piece of black stone and decorated with symbols of the Veltharian Empire. But it was Queen Nara herself who captured his attention. The queen studied the strange creature carefully. It was definitely young, probably the equivalent of a Veltharian teenager. Its clothing was simple and practical, nothing like the elaborate garments worn by nobility. Most interesting of all, it showed no fear despite being surrounded by beings twice its size. "What are you?" Queen Nara asked in the common galactic language. Tae Min tilted his head as if he was trying to understand. After a moment he pointed to himself again and said slowly, "Human. I am human." A murmur went through the court. No one had ever heard of this species called human before. Dr. Yoon Soo, the royal scientist, stepped forward with obvious excitement. "Your Majesty, this could be a completely new intelligent species. We should study it carefully to learn about its capabilities and origins." Queen Nara held up her hand for silence. She continued to stare at Tai Min with her cold, purple eyes. The boy met her gaze without flinching, which surprised her. Most beings found her stare intimidating. "Where do you come from, human?" she asked. Tai Min struggled with the language but managed to say, "Earth. My home is Earth. Ship broken. Family gone." The sadness in his voice was clear even through the language barrier. Several court members exchanged glances. This creature seemed capable of complex emotions just like Veltharians. Minister Chang Ho, the Queen's chief advisor, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we should determine if this being poses any threat to our empire. Its species might have advanced weapons or technology." Captain Hyunwoo shook his head. "The ship was clearly designed for research, not war. The creature appears to be completely harmless." Queen Nara considered this information. The boy did seem harmless enough. In fact, there was something almost calming about his presence. Unlike her usual visitors who radiated fear or ambition, this human seemed genuinely curious about everything around him. Dr. Yun-Su had been studying Tai Min with great interest. "Your Majesty, I would like to request permission to study this creature's abilities. Its brain patterns might be very different from ours." "Granted," Queen Nara replied, "but keep it comfortable. I want to learn more about these humans and their intentions." As the court session continued, Tai Min listened quietly to the conversations around him. He was clearly trying to learn their language and understand their culture. When servants brought him food and water, he thanked them politely, even though they could not understand his words. It was Lady Yeon-seo, one of the younger court members, who made the suggestion that would change everything. "Your Majesty," she said during a brief pause in the discussions, "perhaps we should test this creature's capabilities. If humans are truly a new species, we should understand what makes them special." Queen Nara raised an eyebrow. "What kind of test do you suggest?" Lady Yeon-seo glanced around the room nervously before speaking. "Well, Your Majesty, we have been unable to find anyone who can handle your albino tiger. Perhaps this human could attempt what our people have failed to do." The throne room fell completely silent. Everyone knew about Baekho and the 17 deaths it had caused. The idea of sending this small, seemingly defenseless creature to face the killer tiger struck most of them as either cruel or insane. Queen Nara leaned forward in her throne, her eyes gleaming with sudden interest. "An intriguing suggestion. This human claims to be from a different world with different ways. Perhaps it might succeed where we have failed." Tai Min could sense the tension in the room, even though he did not understand the conversation. He looked from face to face, trying to read the emotions of these strange beings who had rescued him from the crash site. Captain Hyunwoo felt compelled to speak. "Your Majesty, the creature appears to be just a child. Surely it would be slaughtered immediately." "Perhaps," Queen Nara replied with a cold smile, "or perhaps we will witness something unprecedented. Either way, it will be educational." She turned her attention back to Tai Min, who was still watching the proceedings with innocent curiosity. He had no idea that his fate was being decided, or that he was about to face the most dangerous creature in the Veltharian Empire. The Queen's decision was made. Tomorrow, the human would meet Baekho. The morning air was thick with tension as guards escorted Tai Min through the palace corridors toward the lower levels. Word of the human boy's upcoming encounter with Baekho had spread throughout the palace like wildfire. Servants whispered. In corners, and nobles gathered in small groups to discuss what they expected to witness. Tai Min walked calmly between his escorts, his hands folded behind his back. He had spent the night in comfortable quarters learning basic Veltharian words from Dr. Yun-Su. The scientist had tried to explain what was about to happen, but Tai Min's understanding of the language was still limited. All he knew was that he was going to meet an animal that everyone seemed to fear. The thought did not frighten him. Back on Earth, Tai Min had lived on his family's farm, where he helped care for all kinds of creatures. Horses, cattle, even the occasional wild animal that wandered onto their property. He had always found it easy to connect with animals. Queen Nara followed behind with her entourage of advisors and court members. She had not slept well the night before. Part of her was curious to see what would happen. Another part wondered if she was making a terrible mistake by sending a child to face the killer tiger. Captain Hyunwoo walked beside the queen, his face showing clear concern. "Your Majesty, I still believe this is too dangerous. The creature is just a boy." "The boy will face the same choice as all the others," Queen Nara replied coldly. "He can choose to enter the chamber, or he can refuse. No one is forcing him." But, even as she spoke the words, the queen knew they were not entirely true. Taemin was alone on an alien world with no understanding of their language or customs. He was trusting them to guide him, and they were leading him toward almost certain death. The group reached the lower levels where Baek-ho was kept. The corridors here were wider and reinforced with the strongest metals in the empire. Deep scratches marked the walls where the albino tiger had tried to claw its way to freedom during its early days of captivity. Dr. Sang-ho, the beast's keeper, waited nervously by the control panel. "Your Majesty, the creature has been more agitated than usual today. Its pacing increased significantly an hour ago, almost as if it knows something is coming." Taemin heard the deep rumbling sound coming from behind the massive metal doors. It was like distant thunder mixed with the purr of some enormous cat. The sound should have been terrifying, but instead it made him feel curious. "What animal makes that sound?" he asked Dr. Yunsu in his broken Veltharian. The scientist struggled to find simple words. "Big cat. Very big. Very dangerous. Many people dead." Taemin nodded thoughtfully. He had heard similar sounds from the mountain cats that sometimes came down from the hills near his family's farm. Those creatures were dangerous too, but they were also beautiful and intelligent. Queen Nara stepped forward and placed her hand on the control panel. Through the reinforced windows, they could see into Baek-ho's chamber. The massive albino tiger was pacing back and forth, its white fur seeming to glow in the artificial light. Its mercury eyes were fixed on the windows as if it could see them watching. "Magnificent," whispered Lady Yonseo. Even after 3 years, the sight of Baek-ho still took her breath away. The tiger suddenly stopped pacing and turned its head toward the door where Taemin stood. For a moment, boy and beast stared at each other through the reinforced glass. Taemin felt a strange tingling sensation in his mind, as if something was gently touching his thoughts. "It knows we are here," Dr. Sang-ho said nervously. "It always knows." Queen Nara looked down at Taemin. "You may still change your mind, human. No one will think less of you if you choose not to enter." Taemin looked up at her with his dark eyes. Despite his limited understanding of their language, he could sense the importance of this moment. These people needed him to do something that others had failed to do. He did not fully understand what that was, but he knew he had to try. "I go in," he said simply. The guard stepped back as Dr. Sang-ho began the process of opening the chamber. Multiple security systems had to be disengaged in a specific sequence. Emergency protocols were activated. Medical teams stood ready in case they needed to recover whatever remained of the human boy. Taemin waited patiently as the heavy doors slowly opened. The rumbling sound grew louder, and he could smell the wild scent of the great cat. His heart began to beat faster, but not from fear. He felt excited to meet this creature that everyone said was impossible to tame. The chamber was larger than he had expected. The walls were covered with deep scratch marks, and the floor was stained with the blood of previous victims. In the center of the room, Baek-ho stood watching the entrance with those unsettling mercury eyes. The albino tiger was even more magnificent than Taemin had imagined. It stood almost 4 meters tall, and its white fur seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Its massive muscles rippled under its coat as it prepared to charge. For a moment, nobody moved. The watching crowd held their breath. Even Queen Nara found herself gripping the viewing window frame so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Then Baek-ho exploded into motion. The great cat charged across the chamber with a roar that shook the walls. Its claws scraped against the metal floor, sending sparks flying. Its mouth opened wide, showing teeth like white daggers. Death was racing toward the small human boy at incredible speed, but instead of running or screaming, Taemin did something that shocked everyone watching. He sat down cross-legged on the floor and closed his eyes. As Baek-ho reached him, the boy began to hum. It was a simple melody, something his grandmother had sung to him when he was even smaller. The tune was gentle and sad, speaking of loneliness and the desire for companionship. The albino tiger skidded to a stop so close to Taimin that its breath ruffled the boy's dark hair. For the first time in its captivity, Bekho was confused. Its psychic senses had been prepared for fear, anger, or the desire to dominate. Instead, they found only curiosity, sadness, and something else the tiger had never encountered before: compassion. Taimin opened his eyes and looked up at the massive predator looming over him. He continued to hum his grandmother's lullaby as he slowly reached out his hand toward the great cat's nose. "Hello, beautiful one," he whispered in his own language. "You are so lonely, are you not?" Bekho stared down at this strange small creature who showed no fear. The tiger's mercury eyes seemed to soften as it lowered its great head toward the outstretched hand. In the viewing area, Queen Nara watched in stunned silence as the impossible began to happen before her eyes. The silence in the viewing chamber was absolute. Queen Nara and her court watched through the reinforced windows as Bekho lowered its massive head toward Taimin's outstretched hand. The boy continued humming his gentle lullaby, never breaking eye contact with the great predator. When Taimin's fingers touched the tiger's nose, something extraordinary happened. Bekho's mercury eyes closed slowly, and a deep rumbling sound came from its throat. But this was not the threatening growl they had heard before. This was something none of them had ever heard from the albino tiger. It was purring. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Yunsu, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "The creature has never shown peaceful behavior toward any living being." Captain Hyunwoo rubbed his eyes as if he thought he might be dreaming. In all his years of military service, he had never witnessed anything so unbelievable. The killer tiger that had claimed 17 lives was acting like a gentle house cat. Taimin smiled as he felt the warm breath from Bekho's nostrils against his palm. The tiger's fur was softer than he had expected, and he could feel the powerful muscles beneath the shimmering white coat. But more than that, he could sense the creature's emotions through some connection he did not fully understand. Loneliness. That was the strongest feeling coming from the great cat. Years of isolation and fear had made Bekho aggressive and dangerous, but underneath all that pain was a gentle soul that simply wanted companionship. "You have been alone for so long," Taimin said softly in his own language. "I understand. I am alone too now." Bekho opened its eyes and stared into the boy's face. The tiger's psychic abilities let it feel the truth in Taimin's words. This small human had also lost his family. He was also trapped in a strange place far from home. The connection between them grew stronger. Slowly, carefully, Bekho moved closer to Taimin. The massive tiger lowered itself to the ground until it was lying on its belly. Then, in a gesture that made Queen Nara gasp aloud, the great predator began to lick Taimin's bare feet. The rough tongue was warm and wet against his skin. Taimin laughed with delight as the enormous cat showed him the same kind of affection that a pet might show its beloved owner. But this was not submission born of fear or training. This was genuine friendship offered freely. "Look at the size of that tongue," breathed Lieutenant Jin-A, one of the guards watching from the viewing area. "It could strip flesh from bone, but it is being so gentle." Dr. Sang-ho, who had cared for Bekho for 3 years, felt tears forming in his eyes. "I have never seen it show affection to anyone. I thought it was incapable of love." Over the next hour, the watchers observed something that defied all their understanding of the albino tiger. Taimin sat beside the great cat, stroking its fur and continuing to hum his grandmother's songs. Bekho seemed to enjoy the music, its purring growing louder whenever the boy sang. When Taimin stood up to explore the chamber, Bekho followed him like a devoted companion. The tiger stayed close but never crowded the boy, seeming to understand that humans needed personal space. When Taimin sat down again, the great cat curled up beside him like an enormous pillow. Queen Nara found herself leaning forward against the viewing window, fascinated by what she was witnessing. "How is this possible?" she asked Dr. Yunsu. "What makes this human different from all the others who tried?" The scientist shook his head slowly. I believe it is because he approached without fear or aggression. The creature's psychic abilities made it violent when it sensed threatening emotions. But this boy feels no desire to dominate or control. He simply wants to be friends. Lady Yeonseo, who had suggested the test, watched with amazement as Taemin began teaching Baekho simple games. The boy would toss small pieces of debris across the chamber, and the massive tiger would pounce on them playfully. Its movements were graceful and controlled, showing none of the deadly fury that had killed so many before. The human is treating it like a pet, she observed, not like a dangerous beast to be conquered. Captain Hyun-woo nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that is the key. Everyone else saw it as an enemy to be defeated. This boy sees it as a friend to be made. As the day progressed, the bond between Taemin and Baekho grew stronger. The boy shared his lunch with the tiger, hand-feeding it small pieces of meat. Baekho accepted the food gently, careful not to hurt Taemin's fingers with its sharp teeth. When evening came, Dr. Sang-ho prepared to escort Taemin out of the chamber for the night. But as soon as the boy stood to leave, Baekho became agitated. The great cat paced anxiously and made soft whining sounds that clearly expressed distress at the idea of separation. Taemin looked up at the viewing windows where Queen Nara and her court were watching. Using his limited knowledge of their language, he made a simple request. "I stay with friend tonight." The suggestion caused an immediate uproar among the watchers. The idea of leaving a child alone overnight with the killer tiger seemed like madness. But as they watched Baekho's obvious distress at the thought of losing its new companion, some began to reconsider. "Your Majesty," said Dr. Yun-soo, "the creature has shown no aggression toward the human. Perhaps it would be safe." Queen Nara studied the scene below. Baekho had now positioned itself protectively around Taemin, as if guarding the boy from any potential threat. The tiger's body language showed clear anxiety about their separation. "Very well," she decided. "But we maintain constant observation. At the first sign of danger, we extract the boy immediately." That night, the palace guards took turns watching through the viewing windows as something unprecedented occurred. Taemin curled up against Baekho's warm side, using the tiger's thick fur as a blanket. The great predator wrapped its massive paws gently around the boy, creating a protective cocoon. Both human and tiger slept peacefully through the night, the deep rumble of Baekho's purring echoing through the chamber like distant thunder. For the first time in years, neither was alone. Word of the impossible friendship spread throughout the Veltharian Empire like wildfire. By morning, representatives from distant worlds were requesting permission to witness the miracle for themselves. The small human boy had accomplished what the greatest warriors and beast tamers in the galaxy had failed to do. He had found the key to Baekho's heart, and in doing so, he had changed everything the Veltharians thought they knew about both tigers and humans. Queen Nara stood at her viewing window at dawn, watching as Taemin woke up in the protective embrace of the albino tiger. The boy stretched and yawned, then gently scratched behind Baekho's ears. The great cat's mercury eyes opened slowly, filled with contentment. For the first time since capturing the magnificent beast, Queen Nara smiled genuinely. Perhaps some problems could not be solved with force or technology. Perhaps sometimes the answer was as simple as offering friendship to a lonely soul. News of Taemin's success spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, ships from a dozen different worlds arrived at Queen Nara's palace, all carrying diplomats and scientists eager to witness the impossible bond between the human boy and the killer tiger. Ambassador Wu Jin from the Centauri Federation was among the first to arrive. He had traveled for weeks to see if the reports were true. When he looked through the viewing windows and saw Taemin playing gentle games with Baekho, his jaw dropped in amazement. "How long has this been going on?" he asked Queen Nara in disbelief. 5 days, the queen replied, her voice filled with wonder that still had not faded. 5 days, and not once has the creature shown any aggression toward the human. Dr. Yun-soo had been studying the pair constantly since their first meeting. His instruments showed that both Taemin and Baekho displayed brain patterns unlike anything in his databases. When they were together, Their neural activity seemed to synchronize in ways that suggested a deep emotional connection. "Your Majesty," the scientist reported during the morning briefing, "I believe we are witnessing a new form of interspecies communication. The human appears to have natural empathic abilities that allow him to connect with the tiger on an emotional level." Queen. Nara nodded thoughtfully. She had been watching Taimin and Bekho for hours each day, fascinated by their interactions. The boy had taught the massive tiger to play fetch, to sit on command, and even to dance slowly in circles. But these were not tricks learned through fear or food rewards. The tiger performed these actions out of genuine affection for its human friend. More importantly, Bekho had become completely calm and peaceful. The aggressive, dangerous creature that had killed 17 people no longer existed. In its place was a gentle giant that purred contentedly whenever Taimin was near. On the 6th day, representatives from the Galactic Council arrived to investigate the reports. Councillor Parkman was a stern woman who had seen many strange things in her 40 years of diplomatic service. But even she was amazed when she watched Taimin ride on Bekho's back as the tiger carried him around the chamber. "This changes everything we thought we knew about human capabilities," she told Queen Nara. "If one human child can tame your deadliest predator, what other abilities might their species possess?" The question troubled Queen Nara. For 3 years, she had believed that Bekho was untamable by any being in the universe. The tiger's killing spree had proven that even the most advanced civilizations could not break its wild spirit. But a simple human boy had succeeded where entire armies had failed. That evening, Queen Nara made an unprecedented decision. She entered Bekho's chamber herself for the first time since the creature's capture. Taimin looked up in surprise as the queen approached. Bekho tensed slightly but did not move from its position beside the boy. The tiger's mercury eyes tracked the queen's movements, but there was no aggression in its gaze. "Hello," Taimin said in his improved Veltharian. His language skills had grown rapidly during his week in the palace. Queen Nara knelt down beside them, her heart racing despite Bekho's calm demeanor. This close, she could see the intelligence in the tiger's eyes and feel the warmth radiating from its massive body. "How do you do it?" she asked Taimin. "How did you succeed where all others failed?" The boy thought carefully before answering. His vocabulary was still limited, but he wanted to explain something important. "Not try to make Bekho do things," he said slowly. "Just try to befriend. Bekho lonely, I lonely. We help each other." The simplicity of his answer struck Queen Nara like a physical blow. All the warriors, tamers, and psychics she had sent to face the tiger had tried to dominate it, to break its will and force it to obey. None of them had simply tried to be its friend. As if sensing her thoughts, Bekho moved closer to the queen. The massive tiger's nose touched her hand gently, and she felt the same warm breath that had first greeted Taimin a week ago. For a moment, the queen understood what the boy had experienced. She felt the tiger's loneliness and its deep desire for companionship. "Incredible," she whispered, stroking the silky white fur. "You were never truly wild, were you? You were just afraid and alone." Over the following weeks, more ships arrived from distant worlds. Scientists, diplomats, and even other rulers came to study the bond between human and tiger. But more importantly, they came to learn about humans themselves. Reports of Taimin's success had reached Earth through the galactic communication networks. A rescue ship was already on its way to collect the boy and bring him home. But the Veltharian Empire had made an unusual request to Earth's government. They wanted to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. Ambassador Chen Wei arrived from Earth 3 weeks after Taimin's first encounter with Bekho. She was amazed to find the boy healthy and happy, living comfortably in the palace with his enormous feline companion always nearby. "The Veltharians have offered to make you their first human ambassador," she told Taimin during their private meeting. "They believe your people have special abilities that could benefit the entire galaxy." Taimin listened carefully to the proposal. The idea of staying on this alien world as an ambassador was both exciting and frightening. But when he looked at Bekho, who had never left his side since their first meeting, he knew what his answer would be. "Can Bekho come with me if I travel to other worlds?" he asked. Ambassador Chenwei smiled. The Veltharians have specifically requested that you and Bekho work together. They believe your partnership could help solve other problems that force and technology cannot handle. 6 months later, Taemin and Bekho boarded their first diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim territories. Reports had reached Queen Nara of other dangerous creatures on frontier worlds that were causing problems for colonists and traders. A pack of crystal wolves on Rigel 7 had been attacking mining operations for years. Energy weapons and force fields had failed to stop them. But when Taemin and Bekho arrived, the boy used the same patient, gentle approach that had worked with the albino tiger. Within days, the crystal wolves were following Taemin around like loyal pets. The mining operations resumed peacefully, with the wolves actually helping to guard the facilities against real threats. Word of these successes spread throughout the galaxy. Soon, requests for human assistance were coming from dozens of worlds. It seemed that humanity's gift for forming emotional bonds with other species was exactly what the galaxy needed. Queen Nara watched the reports with pride and amazement. The small human boy she had almost fed to her killer tiger had become one of the most important figures in galactic diplomacy. And Bekho, once the most feared predator in her empire, had become a symbol of peace and cooperation between species. As she stood on her balcony looking up at the stars, Queen Nara smiled. Sometimes the greatest discoveries came from the most unexpected places. Humanity had shown the galaxy that strength did not always come from weapons or technology. Sometimes it came from simple kindness and the willingness to offer friendship to a lonely soul. In the distance, a ship carrying Taemin and Bekho to their next mission disappeared into hyperspace, ready to prove once again that love could conquer what force could not.